Welcome to the channel, my dear viewers. Today is the 17th of January, and I'm here to bring you the latest scoop from a perspective not often seen, from the other shore, like any good journalist should. It seems that we find ourselves in the middle of a political storm here in Britain. The Labour Party, once seen as a beacon of hope for the working class, is now in turmoil. Businesses are closing, people are leaving, and the country has the highest rate of millionaires fleeing anywhere in the world. Labour, under the leadership of Keir Starmer, has been hammering down on policies that seem to be doing more harm than good, particularly the decision to raise taxes by a staggering £35 billion. But the real kicker is the government's push for these net-zero rules that are driving industries into the ground. Without affordable energy, many sectors, including steel, are already collapsing. And then, there's the matter of Starmer's backroom dealings. Allegedly, he's been caught having secretive conversations with major international corporations, all while portraying himself publicly as the champion of the working class. One would think this could lead to a scandal, but it doesn't stop there. His dealings with conservative leaders have raised many eyebrows, especially after a tape surfaced, showing him acknowledging secret agreements aimed at pushing policies to benefit the elites, not the everyday worker. In an attempt to spin the narrative, Starmer has tried to brush off these revelations as baseless attacks, but the damage to his credibility is undeniable. The public's trust is waning, and there are increasing calls for his resignation. It begs the question, can Starmer continue to lead, or is this the end of his political career? The political situation in Britain was becoming more turbulent by the day. The Labour Party, once the voice of the working class, was rapidly losing its grip on the public's trust. The crisis, however, was not merely the result of opposition rhetoric, but the inevitable fallout from a string of revelations that had shaken the political landscape to its core. It all began when a journalist uncovered a series of confidential documents that exposed Keir Starmer's involvement in secret meetings with corporate backers. These were not just casual talks but private negotiations, in which Starmer appeared to have sold out the very working-class voters who had put their faith in him. The man who had campaigned as the defender of ordinary Britons now seemed to be nothing more than a puppet of the elite. He had promised change, but what the public saw now was a leader who had sacrificed his principles for political gain. "Well, I'll be blowed," said one of the journalists, eyes widening as they skimmed the leaked documents. "This is the bloke who's been saying all the right things for years, and now it turns out he's been meeting with these fat cats behind closed doors." His colleague, shaking his head in disbelief, added, "It's always the same story, isn't it? He talks a good game, but when it comes down to it, he's no different from the rest of them. A power-hungry politician, just like all the others." The documents were explosive, revealing that Starmer had been meeting with high-powered corporate figures, all while posing as a champion of the working class. It was a staggering betrayal, one that had left Labour supporters reeling. The sense of betrayal was palpable, and across the country, people began to question their support for a man who, up until that point, had promised them a different kind of politics. Soon after, Starmer appeared on television for an interview that was supposed to offer him a chance to defend himself. Instead, it turned into a masterclass in evasion and awkwardness. The interviewer, armed with the leaked documents, wasted no time in confronting Starmer about the private meetings with corporate interests. "Mr. Starmer, these documents show that you've been in discussions with corporate backers, the very people you've claimed to be fighting against. How do you reconcile that with your public persona?" the interviewer asked, their tone sharp and probing. Starmer shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. "Look, I've been working tirelessly for the people of this country. These meetings have been misrepresented, and they don't reflect the work I've been doing on behalf of the working class." But the journalist wasn't having it. "Mr. Starmer, with all due respect, it's hard to believe that these meetings, detailed in these documents, were just about working for the people. It looks more like you've been playing a different game, one where corporate interests take priority. Doesn't that betray the very voters who put you in power?" The question hung in the air, and Starmer's response was more of a stammer than an answer. He fumbled for words, his typical smooth rhetoric failing him when confronted with the undeniable evidence of his political duplicity. The interview continued, but the damage was done. The public, watching from their living rooms, could no longer ignore the growing sense of disillusionment. Starmer's leadership was on the ropes, and the Labour Party was facing a crisis of confidence like never before. But it wasn't just the public that was turning on him. The very foundations of the party were beginning to crumble as well. "We've been defending him for months," said one senior Labour figure, pacing back and forth in frustration. But now, I'm not so sure. If these accusations are true, how can we continue to stand by him? How can we lead a party that's supposed to represent the people, but instead is beholden to the very corporations we've been fighting against? The internal divisions within the party were becoming impossible to ignore. Those who had once been loyal to Starmer now found themselves questioning his leadership. Long-time members of the party, many of whom had spent their entire careers fighting for social justice, were beginning to feel betrayed. "It's not just the Tories we need to worry about anymore," said another Labour MP, "it's our own party. How are we supposed to rebuild trust with the people if we can't even trust our own leader?" As the days passed, the pressure on Starmer mounted. His approval ratings began to plummet, and the looming local elections, which had once been seen as a potential victory for Labour, now seemed like a referendum on Starmer's leadership. If Labour didn't perform well in the elections, it could spell the end of his career. "I don't think he'll survive this," said a former Starmer supporter, shaking their head. The public's had enough. The leaks, the scandals, the corporate ties, it's too much. And let's not forget his handling of Brexit. He's been all over the place on that too. Starmer's troubles didn't end with the interview. Another scandal broke when it was revealed that he had been caught in another compromising position. It was a private matter, but one that had the potential to destroy his already fragile reputation. Allegations of a secret affair surfaced, raising serious questions about Starmer's moral integrity. If true, it was a bombshell that could not only damage his career but also further erode the trust he had already lost. "The man can't seem to catch a break," muttered one Labour backbencher. "Every day there's something new. And it's never good." The interview with the journalist had been the tipping point, but the affair allegations only added fuel to the fire. The public was outraged, and the calls for Starmer's resignation grew louder by the day. His leadership, once seen as the savior of the Labour Party, was now being questioned from all sides. "Can you believe this?" a frustrated Labour MP exclaimed, his voice tinged with anger. "He's supposed to be our leader, but now we're the ones cleaning up his mess. It's disgraceful." Even those within his own party who had once seen him as a viable alternative to the Tories were now rethinking their support. The internal divisions were widening, and the calls for change were growing more insistent. "It's clear now," said another MP, "Starmer is more concerned with holding on to power than with actually leading the country. And if he can't even keep his own party together, how can we expect him to lead the nation?" As the local elections loomed, the future of the Labour Party seemed uncertain. Would Starmer be able to recover from this scandal, or was this the end of his political career? Some believed that the party could still be salvaged if a new leader emerged, one who could unite the party and restore public trust. Others, however, feared that the damage had been done. In the midst of all this uncertainty, one thing became clear: the Labour Party was at a crossroads. Its future, like Starmer's, was now in jeopardy. The next few days, and the upcoming elections, would determine whether Starmer could rebuild his shattered reputation or whether his time as leader had come to an end. And so, the question remained: could Starmer overcome the storm he had helped create? Would the Labour Party survive this crisis, or would it fracture beyond repair? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain: the political landscape in Britain was shifting, and the Labour Party would never be the same again.